Hello and welcome. Let's talk about today's episode of The Mandalorian. It's Season 1, Episode 2, and it's called The Child. So I'm going to follow the same format that I did last week. I'm going to start with just a quick synopsis of the episode, and it's going to be a spoiler section. I'm not going to go scene by scene, but I am going to hit the highlights in a few minutes. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the bad things, my nitpicky things, my neutral things, and all the things I thought were good about the episode. So if you don't want to have it completely spoiled and just want to skip to the light spoiler section, because I will be talking about things that happen in the episode still, you can go to this timestamp up here to skip the spoilers and go to the mostly spoiler-free section, the light spoilers section. So again, this timestamp, here we go. Let's talk about Episode 2 of The Mandalorian, The Child. This episode starts off with Avery making a long walk back to his ship. I guess Brackett's left as soon as the firefight started, and, I can't blame him for that. As he's walking along, Avery is ambushed by some more bounty hunters, and we get to see that, maybe there's something more going on here. The fact that there are still people being given these fobs for the mark, which I'm going to call the mark Thea at this point. During one of the first shots of this episode, you can see kind of on the front of the space bassinet what looks to be a name plaque. It ends up just being some buttons or something. But in that first shot, I saw the word Thea in the negative spaces. Completely made up by my brain. No grounding in reality. But that's what I saw. So until I get a real name, I'm going with Thea. So more bounty hunters are being given the fob to Thea's location. And unlike the hunter droid, these bounty hunters have no issue with straight up killing Avery and stealing the bounty for themselves. Forget the guild rules. After beating off the bounty hunters, Avery is cauterizing a wound on his arm and trying to repair his armor. And we get some hints that maybe Thea is force sensitive, which, surprise, surprise, someone from Yoda's species is super force sensitive. Not that far of a stretch, but it could also just be a red herring. It could just be that Thea is curious about the blood, or Thea wants to be close to the person who rescued her. And I am going to assume that the Yoda baby is a girl just for the time being, just to make life easy for me. And I am assuming also that Avery's a boy, and this is just assumptions on my part. We don't know yet. Either way, Avery puts Thea in the crib and shuts the top. And, I can sympathize as a parent, the desire to want to put the baby in the crib, shut the door, turn off the baby monitor, and just have a minute to yourself. But closing what looks to be an airtight lid over a bassinet, not the best idea. In fact, maybe those weren't bounty hunters at the first of the episode. Maybe that was CPS. Regardless, the next morning, Avery makes his way to his ship and finds that it's being stripped bare by some Jawas. I guess we're on Tatooine then? I figured it was possible the way that Star Wars movies like to self-reference other Star Wars movies, but I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt on the first episode. Avery is understandably upset that his ship is being ripped apart and decides that the best course of action at this point in time is to start vaporizing as many Jawas as he possibly can. And this is some hardcore ammo. One cartridge, one shot, complete disintegration, and Avery is not missing. Full points to Avery for his anti-stormtrooper aim. Once the Jawas begin to flee, Avery tries to board the sandcrawler, but it goes fairly well at first until Avery gets to the chop and is just completely surrounded by Jawas who stun the crap out of him, and he falls off the edge to the ground. So Mandalorians are definitely built tougher than humans, because that fall would have straight up killed any human. With his ship in pieces, his weapons gone, and just nowhere left to go, Avery heads back to Brackett's place. Brackett and Avery talk about the ship, and Brackett says he'll take Avery to the Jawas so that he can trade with them for the parts that they stole from Avery. Since Brackett has spoken, that's what they're going to do. Upon reaching the Jawas aren't overly happy to see the person who vaporized so many of them, and they make Avery leave his rifle and blasters behind on the transport sled. This is something that Avery reluctantly agrees to, though he still tries to cinch them at one point in the trade conversation. At first they ask for his Beskar armor, but he says, no, I'm a Mandalorian, can't do that. Then they ask for Thea, and that's not acceptable. And finally they say, well, in that case, the only thing that we're going to trade for the parts that we stole from you is the egg. And everyone starts chanting, the egg, the egg, the egg. And Avery's like, what's the egg? So of course we cut scenes, and Avery travels to the den where the egg is and gets into a fight with a woolly rhino. Now, I love this fight. Avery gets his butt handed to him hard and is straight up about to die when Thea intervenes and uses the force on the woolly rhino to save Avery's life. It gives Avery just enough time to pull out his knife and stab it in the leg, which I guess this woolly rhino has his heart located like right here on his front leg. It's a space creature. Sure, why not? That's where his heart is located. Regardless, the knife goes in, the rhino drops dead. And Thea passes out from the effort it took to lift the woolly rhino off the ground. After returning the egg to the Jawas, Avery gets his parts back, and returning to the ship, Avery and Brackets work together the whole night through to repair the ship. They say farewell to each other. They kind of have this nice, parting moment. And then Avery flies off with Thea, with the episode ending with Thea waking up after, what seems to be a good amount of time. Okay, so that was the spoiler section of this review. For the rest of this video, I'm going to keep any spoiler that I do make very light, very general, shouldn't impact your enjoyment of the show should you choose to see it. Let's start off talking about the bad things about this episode. First off, today's episode, it was kind of weak on the plot. It was kind of too contrived for my tastes. Now, obviously, if Avery had been able to go straight into his ship, leave the planet, he would have turned over Thea to the Imperial cell. And, just in case you weren't here for the spoiler section, Thea is just the name I'm giving the mark. We don't know the mark's name yet, but I'm going to call the mark Thea. So, obviously, Thea would have been handed over to the Imperial cell, which I suppose an abbreviation for them could be M-cells. I'm sorry, I know, that joke was pretty lame. It was just such low-hanging fruit, and I wanted to make it so bad on the last episode, but I chose not to, and I couldn't resist anymore. Anyways, I do wonder if by the end of the season, we're going to have the last episode, the climax of the season, be Avery handing Thea over to these M-cells. Or if we'll do it around the midway point, and then Avery will have a change of heart and rescue Thea. I don't know. I'm interested to see where they go with the season. But this is kind of my second bad part of this episode. With this episode being over, we are 25% of the way through season 1. There are only 8 episodes in this entire season. And that may seem like we have a lot of time left, but there was a lot of plot hinted at in the trailers for The Mandalorian. So unless all that footage is from season 2, we're going to be potentially cramming just a ton of plot into a few episodes. And even worse, today's episode was only half an hour long. That is 10 minutes less than episode 1 was. So, I mean, we're doing more plot with less time, and that's something I'm worried about. My last big negative is how quickly Avery repaired his ship. When you see the ship, it is definitely like, hey, take it to the junkyard levels of damaged. And yet, we're even told, in fact, that it would be a 3-day job minimum at a maintenance facility specifically designed for repairing ships. And yet, Avery and Brackets are able to fix it overnight. And just so you know, I did try to look up the name of Brackets. There's just no mention of him anywhere in the credits. I had to go into IMDb, and the most I got there was Kyle Ugnaught, which I'm pretty sure someone put in there as a joke. Kyle is the first name of the actor playing this character, and then I'm pretty sure that Ugnaught is just a combination of the word ugly and some alien creature-y sounding name, so Ugnaught. So we don't even know the name of this character. It's never mentioned on screen, it's not even mentioned in the credits, and it's not even mentioned on IMDb. I'm pretty sure someone just made that up. So those are my three negatives. The plot felt contrived. We had to keep Avery here, so let's break the ship. But then they were able to repair the ship overnight, which, they could have fixed that so easily. It could have been one essential part that they had to fix. And they had to trade for the Jawas to get the part. And then they repaired it overnight. I would accept that. I would believe that. But the state of the ship was just utterly destroyed. And the fact that they were able to fix it overnight, it was a bad part of the episode to me. Well, those are my three bad things. Let's talk about my nitpicks. And my nitpicks, again, these are kind of light nitpicks. They're doing a good job on the show overall. My first nitpick is that it didn't really make sense for Avery to be using the special ammo on the Jawas. Like I said, it was clearly special ammo. Each time he pulled out a casing, it was a single round. You had to manually load it, and it straight up disintegrated the target, or vaporized them, whatever you want to call it in this universe. And he had a limited supply of it. So why would he be using it on Jawas when we've already seen that he's quite proficient with his blaster? A on-screen answer is that this ammo is going to be important later on in the series. Hopefully in season 1, so we get a quick payoff. But at some point, this ammo is going to come up. So they needed to showcase this ammo's effectiveness at this point so that we would know that it exists for something later on in the season. I would have liked to see a more organic reason to see it, something that fit in with the show a little bit better, rather than just picking off some random Jawas, but I get it. Like I said, nitpicky. One of my other nitpicks is that in one of the fight sequences, Avery's bandolier that holds the special ammo, it keeps changing locations. And this isn't just like, I'm in a fight, so of course this is shifting around. I mean, sometimes it's on top of the breastplate, sometimes it is under the breastplate, sometimes it's just gone altogether. I swear, I am not looking for things to find fault with this show. It's a fast scene. So when you're doing lots and lots of cuts and you have a character and you're showing them from, about waist high up in general, it's zoomed in on them, I'm going to notice if you're making continuity errors like that. I just can't help but notice, in fact, to see these things. It's a nitpicky thing. I admit it. My final nitpick is, like I said earlier, the show is not doing a great job at its end credit scenes. The fact that I had to look up the name of Brackets on IMDb because the actor playing him isn't even mentioned anywhere in the credits of episode 1 or 2 is a bad thing. I get that usually the way a credit works today is that, movie ends, credits begin, and the first name you get is like the most famous actor you have. So this would be like, Patrick Stewart makes an appearance. Boom, Patrick Stewart right there up front. And then you'll do the names of the lesser actors, and then the smaller print credits will roll up the screen and it scrolls up there. And each actor's name, character they played, stuff like that. However, in The Mandalorian, they don't even do it that way. The very first name you see is Jon Favreau's, which he's a good director, I'll grant him that, but top credit worthy? And then he's followed by, based on Star Wars by George Lucas, he's followed by the directors, which again is him and some other guy. He's followed by the executive producers, which is Kathleen Kennedy and some other guy. And then finally, you get the name of the actor playing the Mandalorian. And in episode 1, you got the name of some other, big ticket actors who appeared on screen. In this episode, you just get the Mandalorian's name. That's it. And then we go to the small print section of the credits, and they don't mention anyone else. I mean, they have time to mention the 14 vice presidents of Lucasfilm, the 11 vice presidents of Disney, but they don't have time to put the names of the random cast members who are there. And that's a pretty big slight. I really like the behind the scenes information about movies, and the fact that they're not putting the names of the actors who appeared on screen. It is in truth a big negative. I was going to put this in the bad section of my review, but it doesn't affect the actual story of The Mandalorian. So this is only a nitpick of mine, but it is a big nitpick. The Mandalorian in episode 1 who made the armor, did you know that character, the actor who played that character's name is Emily Swallow? No, you don't, unless you have looked her up on IMDb, because they don't mention her anywhere in the credits. It really makes me mad that they did this. It's such a slap in the face. Like, an actor works so hard, even if all they do is a bit part. You spend hours getting ready for that bit part, to get in the costume, get the makeup, and all that stuff. And this is your livelihood. And to not get credit on a movie or a show, it's real rude, and I didn't like it at all. So leaving that behind, let's talk about the neutral things. We continue to get a lot of walking in this episode. Like I said, we are 25% of the way done with the season, and in this one episode, the very first way it starts is you spend 4% of your runtime for the entire show walking. There is a minute and a half at the first that is a recap of the episode. There are like 2.5 minutes at the end of the episode that's just credits, so that leaves you 27 minutes of runtime for this episode. And they waste 4% of it to start off with walking. And that's just at the start. I didn't go through and calculate how much time they wasted walking in this episode, but it was kind of a lot. Now look, from 2001 to 2004, there was a show called Samurai Jack. It aired on Cartoon Network. It's obviously a cartoon, and it's one of my favorite cartoon shows because a lot of the episodes do focus on, like, there's no dialogue. It's just Jack is walking from point A to point B, and things end up happening to him. But it's also a highly artistic show, and the format paid off heavily. In fact, in 2017, they had a one-season revival of it, which I can't say anything about that season. I haven't watched it, but the first 4 seasons are well worth the watch if you enjoy a bit of a different style. But, I don't want to jump the gun on The Mandalorian. It's just, we're fast approaching this series becoming a walking simulator. And for anyone who doesn't know or who aren't into video games, a walking simulator is a game that lacks more traditional elements that you find in video games, like action or interaction with stuff, enemies. Instead, they tend to be more like a visual novel where you go from point A, walk over to point B, and read the next page of the novel. So instead of turning pages, I'm walking to the next part of the narrative. Some of them are real fun. Some of them can be really boring. A lot of them have great graphics or compelling narrative. But at the end of the day, it's more of a novel that you walk through rather than a true game. And that's what this series seems like it's heading to with how much walking they're doing. We're hitting the point where it's almost like they don't have enough content for even 8 episodes, and so they're just padding their runtime. So I said it wasn't a bad way to start episode 1, and it wasn't. Episode 1, I don't mind a slower pace because we're kind of being introduced to the world. Now that we're in episode 2, it does leave me worried, especially since there are only 8 episodes in this season. So it's kind of making me think we're going to have 6 episodes of padding runtime and then 2 episodes of like plot, 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 boom, we're done. And that's not good pacing. So I do hope that I'm just being overly worried at this point, and that's not something we're worried about long term. So that's my neutral things, which is just the one thing. My neutral thing is that it's a little bit too slow paced, a little too much walking. But like I said, last week, episode 1, that was good. Episode 2 is only neutral because I'm hoping that it's not what they do for the rest of this series or season at the very least. So let's talk about the good things, the things that I really enjoyed about this episode. First of all, I really liked, there was a line with the Jawa. So Avery comes up on the sled and he's told to leave his rifle behind. And he responds, "I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are a part of my religion." And I don't know enough about Mandalorians to know if this is a true statement. But until someone more knowledgeable corrects me, I'm going to assume that this was a lie. Because that just makes for a real funny line. Like, I don't want to give up my gun, so I'm going to make up something about it being part of my religion, because you can't discriminate based on religion. So I hope that was the case. I hope it was just a complete lie, because that line had me really laughing. The second thing that I really enjoyed is there's another funny line in the exchange with the Jawas. Avery tries to speak to the Jawas in their own language, and they start laughing at him. And they're mocking him and like, "You speak terrible Jawa, you pronounce like a Wookiee. And at that point, he tries to like singe them with his flamethrower. It's a funny moment. I really love moments like these where your characters are less than perfect, because so many times in Star Wars, you'll hear Chewbacca talk, and I can just translate it. I know Wookiee. Of course I know Wookiee. I've never met a Wookiee before in my life, but I am just so amazing that I know Wookiee. And this isn't just something that Rey does. Like in the video games, you'll have moments like this where someone is just so incredible in the Force that they know every language out there. So I really enjoy that they are taking a more down-to-earth style approach for this universe, or for this series of the Star Wars universe. That it feels more real. It feels like I'm watching an everyday person going through the struggles of their life. And I'm liking this. And I do like a lot of the Jawa interaction. We got to see more about them than what we've seen on screen up to this point, but at the same time, the show didn't feel like it needs to try to reveal everything about them. Like, we don't need to know why they're called Jawas. We don't need to know how they reproduce. We don't need to know their social or political structure. And so the show wastes no time addressing those things. It was such a breath of fresh air. When there are so many franchises that think world building means destroying the mystery. That world building means taking the fantastic and making it mundane. So I was really excited to see that The Mandalorian, while it's letting us to see more of the Jawas, it's leaving the mystery there. And I really appreciated that. Finally, I do like this growing plot point around the additional bounty hunters receiving the order to kill Thea. This was a special job. Avery had to go out of their way to find out about this job and receive partial information from the client directly. So I like that there's kind of this growing plot of, is there a third party involved, or is the general of the M-Cells sending out additional bounties behind Dr. Concave Chest's back? So I'm really interested about that. I like that they're building this up. So in the end, that's all my good things. So in the end, I'd say that this episode, it was around a 7 out of 10. It wasn't as good as the first episode, but I don't want to overly judge it until I see later episodes. And to be fair, I may retroactively come back and downgrade this episode to a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10, simply because as I see more of the series, if it turns out where the slow pacing at the front means that I overload the plot at the back, then the front becomes less good. Taking your time and building up a story is great storytelling, provided the pacing matches with the rest of the story. So we'll see. I may have to revise this later. As one other side note, just something that made me laugh again, the Mandalorian's theme, it's going to be going on the entire season, and the entire series even. And I had to look it up. I found out that the instrument they're using is a bass recorder. A recorder like that little instrument you use all throughout elementary school, and no one can play it well. Well, it turns out there's a 5-foot tall version of this that looks almost like a bassoon. And in fact, at first I was thinking, like, what on earth could this instrument be? It has the kind of the same octave range as a bassoon, but it didn't sound like a bassoon. And so I looked it up, and I was so glad that there was one article I found that said that this is a bass recorder, and I got to hear some of the music. But it cracks me up because I'm gonna do a clip here, and you can hear the French horn joke from Stan Freberg.
I hope. What was that? French horns. No.
So that's what the French horns sound like in Stan Freberg, and then you can hear this is what the Mandalorian sounds like. The Mandalorian theme sounds like in The Mandalorian. So you can see that it is just similar enough there where it's going to crack me up every single time I hear it. You know what? In other news, I got a copy of the ebook that is supposed to be required reading to go see Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. This is supposed to bridge the gap between episodes 8 and 9, which I don't like the fact that they're doing that, but you know what? I am doing my best to give this final entry into the Star Wars Skywalker canon a fair shot. I saw someone else do a review of the book, and they haven't read it. They're reviewing what other people said. I think they're being way overly critical. I think they took a quote out of context. Do I have high hopes for the book? No, I don't, but I want to read it myself. So I got a copy of the ebook, and hopefully I can give this ebook a quick review, quick synopsis in the upcoming weeks before The Rise of Jedi comes out. And we're going to wrap it up there, guys. So until the next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.